Hey, Heather. How are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How's everything?
I'm doing good.
Good. Hi, Adam. How are you? Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hello.
Good. Heather, did you take a peek at the remark I made about your internet service?
Is it acting up?
No, it's just that it has in the past. I've never said anything to you, so I don't know if like you have a whole bunch of like people in your house that are searching and
Yeah.
on the band, crunching up the bandwidth there when you're in session.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's fine now.
Yeah, and that would be because my brother moved out over the weekend and he had a computer in the basement, and that's probably why. He was using the computer as a server, so it was like a 24/7 eating up bandwidth thing. So
Yeah. So I was going to say that if you were not going to make it for the for the final presentation, the final benchmark, if you were not going to drive in, then get more speed or something.
yeah.
If you've ever kind of watched your conversations with me, they've always had kind of an echoing kind of effect, and I think that's when he's, maybe betting on the horses or watching the Victoria's Secrets swimsuit calendar parade thing or something. Who I'm not going to go any deeper than that, but I just feel like he's sharing the internet stuff with you, and you should get first priority. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be a problem anymore.
Good. I'm glad you kicked him out. Great. And thank you for turning around the last sort of bit for me yesterday. I wasn't sure what had happened. And actually, I wasn't sure if I had received them and just misfiled them or misplaced them. So thanks for doing that so quickly. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So Drew, you got your email sent all the way to the top of the house.
Yeah.
Carl Dobman emailed me, and I could just see his hand on his hip, and he's like, "Do we really need Lumion?" And I'm like, "Dude, that's the stuff I showed you at my lecture last fall. That's what the school bought for everyone, and that's all we ever use at the office." And I said, and when I started talking about this stuff back in 14 and 15, a lot of my students realized that they had that software in their offices and they had never dabbled with it. So all of my students began to dabble with Lumion, and now I've got 20 kids that are 30 kids that are fluent in it. And I said, plus that's all we ever use.
I just downloaded that today.
Did you?
And I watched the the video that's on the website that's basically, oh, this is everything Lumion does, or a general picture of it. And I was amazed.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, my mouth was hanging open, and I was here by myself just watching.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. And we have a sort of a professional suite, which costs $3,000 or $4,000. I don't encourage you to do that. But if you all are working in offices, I do encourage you to press your firms to do it, because your life will be a lot easier, because you can use SketchUp or Revit and export directly from that into the Lumion sort of module. And it allows for post-processing with like Photoshop or what have you. So it's really, it's pretty cool.
I was able to get Lumion for free, even though my computer doesn't really do much with it because it's all low in the requirement stage.
Right.
But, there is a student thing. Like you can, I think the way that I got it was I turned in a transcript, and then I was able to get a free, it's either a semester or a year.
Right. So Drew ran into some static with the suite he downloaded today. I think he's frustrated with the limitation of it.
Yeah, so I downloaded Saturday, which took an hour just to download because the file size, and spent about 5 or 6 hours just messing with it and rendering some things. And the quality of the output for the educational version that students can get is 1280 by 720, which is 11 by 17, but if you zoom in on it, it's really pixelated. So I went to Mark and asked him what I could do. Then I went to Scott Shaw and asked him to renew the license for the school, and they're currently working on it. And that's what Mark was talking about.
Yeah, so he contacted Dale Geyer, who's kind of either holding the purse or knows the email of the person who's holding the purse, and he shared the email also with the dean, Carl Daubman, who contacted me about it.
Drew, did you download the one directly from Lumion's site and use your credentials?
Yeah, you just took a photo of your ID.
Yeah, I did that too. I haven't had a chance to install it, so you're saying no good.
No, it's good. It's just the output right now is pretty low, and I could show you what I have done, but once you zoom in on it, it just gets pixelated.
Right. No, I got you.
Good point.
Thanks.
Okay, so Drew's here, and Tim's here, Mark's here, Adam was here, but he backed out. Heather and Brianna are here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll get started because it is 1:30, and I know Brandy is not going to be able to join us tonight. So I'm going to suggest that she sort of watch the video. I used the best of my time over the weekend, which was mostly work, but part play and a lot of air travel as a way of working on your grade sheets. And I was able to sort of do the text on 4 of them on the plane, and then sort of work through the grading, if you will, on Sunday afternoon after I got back. So you all have now comments from Lindsay, which I think I sent to you on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. You have comments from each of yourselves, from each of your classmates, and you have my grade sheets, which I sent to you Sunday evening. So you are clearly and officially at the 2/3 point for this semester. I want to pause for just a second to make sure everyone got that stuff. And if there's any questions or concerns or anything like that, this would be a good time to bring that up. Okay. Well, we can come back to that if it does occur to you. And as you know, those grade sheets included more comments, and I'm happy to do that for you on these. I also want to remind you that this most recent benchmark has the stakes are just a little bit higher in terms of the value, right, of this benchmark compared to the first benchmark. And similarly, the third benchmark will be more valuable toward your final grade. So the burner on the stove goes up a little higher, and the stakes are a little higher. So a B in the second benchmark is actually not as good as a B in the first benchmark, right? So you definitely want to try to show some improvement, or at least maintain, your work. Although I always want you to try to do better and to try to do more. But I will remind you that the final grade is also discretionary to some extent. It is based on an arithmetic sort of evaluation or averaging of your hard grade, which are the benchmark grades. But they also do consider kind of the intangible things. This is nothing new to you. You've heard me say all of this before, but just the sort of quality of engagement, the kinds of conversations you lead in these individual sessions and so on. So there's just there's the potential that after you get 3 benchmark grades, that even when you sit down and calculate the final grade, that your final grade may be different, slightly different than what you thought you were going to get. That's not a promise. That's just, again, part of the sort of privilege and prerogative that I have as your faculty member, and it's also part of what I think is fair, right, for a graduate studio, because it's not like it's not an engineering studio where values are kind of binary, if you will, right? Now, given that we're 2/3 of the way through the semester and it's already the end of March, we will have a short sort of visual presentation tonight in just a few moments, and desk crits on tonight and Wednesday night. And then we're into next week, which I think will be my final lecture, which will be April 3rd. And we'll have a regular week that week and the following week. The week of the 17th is Hell Week. So we don't really have class that week. So we won't meet on the 17th or the 19th unless sometime on Sunday the 16th you email me and you say, oh my God, I'm just at a loss for what to do here. Can we meet? And I'm happy to do that, right? So, but if we do meet that week of the 17th or the 19th, I'd like it to be somewhat convenient to me. I don't know what I'm doing on the 17th or the 19th. I'm not going anywhere, but if we could do it earlier than later, that would be maybe, for instance, more beneficial to me. But again, that's kind of up to you. And then we have pencils down on the 25th. We'll have a very, very brief class on the 24th, basically just to go over some last minute things. And then we will have our review on the 29th. We'll also have a final class session on the 1st, right? And that will be some final remarks on teaching and practicing. It will be some thoughts and maybe predictions on architecture as a profession, and maybe some encouraging words about your role in it. And then I'll sit with each of you in that sort of individual mode, just to go over, your impressions of your benchmark and the grades and things like that, and from your colleagues and from your critics, and what your next steps are in terms of your career. And that will be the last class. I then sit down and compute the grades probably on the weekend of the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and I process them very quickly. You don't get a final grade sheet. You will just get one more grade sheet this semester, and that will be for benchmark 3. That is the one from me, from your classmates, and from your critics. Okay? And since I don't know who the critics are going to be just yet, again, the grade sheets from them is always, it's only as good as what you give them, and it's only as good as what they give you back in return. So some of the grade sheets I think are very thoughtful. I think Lindsay takes a lot of care to do her grade sheets. I think some other people, don't take as much care, but that's okay. I mean, that's kind of, it's good that you see that. As someone said to me after they got the student grade sheets last weekend, it was like, that's interesting, meaning like there's like a full gamut of things that were being discussed, and you didn't really know that was coming, and I think that's a really healthy thing. So any questions about the look ahead? Right, so you've been through January, February, and March basically, and it's now full out. I would say unofficially, even though this is being recorded, that you should consider taking as much time off during Hell Week from work as you can, so that you can concentrate on the final product. I know we talk a lot about process, and I know we talk a lot about working towards the end, but you really do need some undivided attention and time on your final project. And if you have the luxury of a couple of days off, I would encourage you to take that, because it's a really important moment in your graduate career. It's a really important presentation. It's your final studio, and I really do want you to put your best foot forward, not for me or your classmates necessarily, but for you and what this project will mean in your portfolio as you embark on your professional career as a Master of Architecture. And that career is going to be different than the career you have right now with your firm. I know that you will likely be very comfortable staying where you're staying, but you become changed with two major milestones happening in your career. One is that you graduate and you start asking really profound questions like, is this all the fuck there is? Right? And then you'll have another major milestone when you become registered, and that's when you ask that other F-bomb question: is this all you're going to pay me? Right? Because at those two moments, right, you begin to evaluate very concertedly what is important to you. And if you have a really strong set of projects in your graduate portfolio, they become the currency, right? They become the admission ticket for conversations at a very high level with the firm that you may consider going to after one or both of those milestones. Okay? That's the pep talk. Let's go over a couple of things that I want to show you. I'm going to give you some examples of the work of other people today. I don't really know anything about these pieces. I may have even shown you some of these things before, so I apologize for that. But then I want to show you some work next week of some of your colleagues, and I'm very excited about that. And I do this, right? I do this tonight as a way of getting you to start thinking about drawings in the general sense, and we'll talk about drawings next week in the specific sense, but also thinking a little bit about the ideas embedded in these. I just inhaled a sandwich, so I'm struggling with that. Let me pull that stuff up. So I'm going to screen share. No, I'm not going to do that. I made the cardinal mistake there. Okay. So I'm just going to go through these real quick. Give me a thumbs up so that you can let me know you've seen it. Okay, good. So again, this is work that I don't really know much about. It's work that we've collected in our office for our projects. In other words, we've used some of these in our own case studies. And I think it's important that you see them. What am I showing here? You know, you can read into these anything you want. You can begin to assess or imagine what we're trying to get across when we include work like this. But remember that we're interior architects, we're planners, we're landscape architects and architects. So a lot of these case studies that you're about to see maybe cover some things that are not pure architecture, but they are kind of provocative projects, and I think they deserve some attention today. This one, for me, is talking about simple volumes in a fairly straightforward skin with deep punched windows, with inset balconies and projecting balconies, all within a fairly compact volume. This drawing is another, simple mixed-use building that shows the various uses delineated or described volumetrically and in terms of transparency and opacity. In other words, the 3 floors of residential have punched windows and what I would call bay windows, right? These things right here with inset balconies right? The standard vocabulary elements that we talk about a lot in residential. And then it has a floor of office that's rendered as simple, 4x8 sheets of glass with simple mullions and simple horizontal muntins, right? With a balcony or some sort of, maybe not a balcony at all, but just some sort of transparent condition that gives the building some animation during the late afternoon, early evenings. And then the first floor is maybe a blend of like classroom, coffee shop, commercial space. Also notice the way that the sidewalk wraps around the entire development and engages the public sidewalk as well. Notice that the time of day of this shot is autumn and in the late evening on a very cloudy day. You don't have to pick the Pollyanna blue sky, pure July day in Michigan as a way of describing the architecture. Sometimes this moment of the day, the gloaming, the sunset, the twilight hour, is actually a very interesting moment to render in because it shows both surface and interior at the same moment. This is maybe just a grocery store, but I like the dramatic angle of the shot, and it shows how a simple idea, so it doesn't have to be a grocery store that you're describing. It could be an exercise area or a swimming pool or a community space, but notice how the big design idea of the clerestory, how that's treated as a design element as a background condition where the stuff in the foreground is in and under a lower ceiling. So I appreciate how this is not a simple and straightforward one-point perspective. It is something that has a little bit more dynamism to it. This is an interesting image that shows, again, that moment of twilight and shows how outdoor spaces can have interior functions like cafe tables and chairs, and how the ceiling of an overhang can actually be this perforated or slatted condition that lets maybe light fixtures drop down through it. It's a high volume space, but it's actually a space that has some demarcation and definition to it because of this surface here and this surface here and this surface here. And how the first floor of this building is raised up just a couple of feet to give a stage-like here and there kind of quality to it. So these are design ideas that, as you're working through your designs, begin to think about how the ground plane can be special or more special just by elevating it a few feet. Again, simple volumes with simple window systems, but this building's actually a lot more complicated than that. This building runs from here to here, and this is actually by Richard Meyer. This is all part of the language. So it goes salt, pepper, and salt, right? White, black, white. Notice how the skin not only changes color, but it changes material. So we have a masonry skin on the corner, right? So in order to establish gravity and weight relative to the overall composition, the material choice is one of solidity and durability and permanence. And notice how that same language extends laterally and then holds a more transparent volume above it. And that volume has a different language of fenestration than anything else around it. It has a language of one large punched window with a continuous sort of horizontal brow. And that skin almost has a translucent glass quality to it, which I think is really interesting. Notice how the ground floor is opened up as a retail or commercial space. Notice how the windows are inset, but then some of the brick is actually given a highly textured vertical condition. So the brick spandrel is an opportunity to introduce sort of surface and texture and therefore scale to the building. And notice how the top floor is actually all open, to the roof, right? And that opening is then screened with like maybe a perforated or metal panel or a perforated screen. And then the windows and the skin below are sort of like the skin here, but more like the windows here. So as the building turns the corner, as the building establishes its presence on the corner, it does so with three different kinds of language. And this is a way of creating interest on the streetscape. It's a way of letting architecture tell a story. And it's also a way of letting a big thing be understood as, well, three smaller things. And I think that's a very interesting sort of approach. You know, many of you haven't really gotten into sort of tall buildings, but even in this case, you know, you may at some point. And in this case, this is a simple material. Let me get back over here. This is a simple metal panel material that just provides some language of openings against opacity. And notice how the things that are opaque don't necessarily always line up, but occasionally they do, or occasionally they make conditions of diagonals occur. So this is a skin that's fairly assertive and vocal in its presence, but the thing that kind of grounds it all is the 2-story height space of retail on the ground floor. And I think that one of the things that many of you are considering is this commercial realm with other things sitting on top of it, and how they meet, how they juncture, how they marry becomes a sort of a counterpoint in this firm's work. This is that same building, right? So I'll go back a slide. So you see how the skin is kind of dropping down. The sculptural quality of this building drops down to receive another tower. So the metal skin building becomes a podium for this wonky skin building. And that is this element here. And that terraced sculptural quality of the building that you saw here in the foreground, right? It sits, of course, flat and conforming to the street. As it turns the corner, it then has a kind of brother-sister quality to it, and that staggering, that terracing of that mass allows for horizontal terraces to occur, and it creates some volumetric spatial interest within the overall composition. It's all one building, but it reads as different things along the way. Talk a lot about diagrams. This is a diagram of the last two plates that you just saw, right? Let me zoom in just a little bit more. So here's the original diagram, right? Notice how the building height is described with a simple dashed line. Notice how that height is also referenced as a pure volume. So right off, so there's probably like another set of diagrams that came before this, but essentially what they did is they kept some of the building at the maximum height, and they showed straight away that they cut away at it to create a volume that did not necessarily maximize the site. And then because of like solar conditions, right? They show, like Bjarke Engel showed us early on, the sort of push-pull, the tensional, right? The tensional compositional forces acting on the volume in this upper right diagram. And then in the lower left diagram, talking a little bit about, let me see if I can see in the lower left diagram, I guess my mouse doesn't line up either. In the lower left diagram, how that terracing gives the homeowners, right, views to the east and to the south. So this again is a way of showing how you're connecting to the context, how you're giving primacy to the homeowners or the viewers of your facility, of your development, and yet creating architectural form out of it. And then showing in the lower right drawing a sort of a graphical approach to extending the garden, the language of the garden in the courtyard between the new building and the existing building, right? and then letting that migrate up into your development. This building is right here. This building is, again, showing the strategy of, you guys are not necessarily dealing with large buildings in some of these conversations. Some of these images may relate more to the work that you'll do later on. But again, taking a look at how to grapple with a much larger mass by sort of stepping it back, terracing it back, as you see in the upper left on the left image, and then creating a series of frontal planes that recede back from the street as a way of allowing the street to exert pressure on the mass as well. Diagrams that, again, this is that same attitude, letting the streetscape, this is the drawing of the building that we just saw. So this is obviously in Toronto, and letting the diagram show you how context informs your architecture, and this terrace not only allows, this terrace or sculpted chamfer allows for a more interesting mass to occur in the architecture. It also indicates that as you extend that dashed diagonal line down to the street, right down to Yonge Street, it allows the sidewalk to be illuminated with natural light, with sunlight. So this is showing, if you will, a contextual response not only to the street but also to sunlight. And so that takes us through those images. I have another set of things that I want to show you now. I'll go back to that, sorry. So these are just these are details that you'll see, that we look at in terms of the ground plane. Here, working with a very simple geometry like the square, bisecting it with a smooth walk, and then introducing a much smaller pattern of scored masonry with a high texture finish, and dropping out a few of those flags to allow the trees to sort of emerge through it, and then contrasting that right with a rough-hewn stone wall that you see on the far left. Letting the surface overhead be a spectacle of like texture or light. This could be a soffit, this could be a painting, this could be a series of light fixtures. In this case, it's a series of eyes that look down on the sidewalk. The courtyard between buildings, right, is an opportunity not only for plantings, right, but notice how the sidewalk is this sort of like two fingers beginning to interlace or interlock, creating sort of a not straightforward, a non-straightforward pattern of hardscape and softscape with greenscape. Here's some of the same details, but in the light of day. And again, and then introducing bars, right, of stone as seating opportunities. And here's one of those right now. Incidental areas that might run up against the edge of a property, like Brianna, you have something like this. Drew, you have something like this. You all have things like this. So what do you do with those like areas where you ain't building? These can be programmed. So here's somebody working way too hard to lose that six-pack that they've got around their waist, and yet it's this soft and sort of playful area with the sidewalk in the foreground, or a bench. Perhaps that's a bench in the foreground. Here, a section as a way of describing the spatial qualities of this this element, right? So you see things in section, you see the context beyond as a faint kind of drawing. I can see where Drew and Heather, even Tim, you could engage a drawing like this. Actually, Mark, with the raised elevation of your ground plane, I could see a drawing like this coming into play. And then the three balloons that are floating above are ways of describing things in detail that are happening in the section that you can't see because it's just a section. So it's a drawing that's both sectional, elevational, and in some ways it's detail. Signage and wayfinding, thinking of ways of like codifying or branding your development, right? Thinking about edges really as a very, very ripe opportunity for, you know, not only framing the development, but letting the development be experienced as you walk around it or as you walk adjacent to it. Spaces that kind of break from the normal sort of grid or line of circulation and create these little apses or moments or episodes where people can sit and be a little bit more secure that, you know, they're not going to get jogged or jostled by someone jogging by, or perturbed or irritated by someone that's, you know, walking by, that there's a place to do maybe banking or reading or writing a letter like that dude in the suit while he's eating his lunch. But I love this idea really of creating these moments where something private can occur within the public realm. That's kind of a lovely notion. Thinking of furniture as a design thing, not just as something that you kind of find in your Revit library, thanks to Lawrence Tech or whoever you harvested your stuff from, but thinking about the design of the furniture as something that actually might, you know, relate to the architecture, whether in material, whether in color, or maybe in shape, right? If you were to hear that this furniture was designed by ISA, and then you remember the sectional sort of ideas in their work, you'd go, yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, that's cool stuff. Not that this was designed by them, but right, the architect can take it that far. Real simple things in real basic and kind of unadorned and highly, you know, prosaic spaces, alleys, courtyards. Thinking of lights as something that can create sparkle and definition, can create kind of a ceiling or a veil over the open air sort of condition of it, and yet be beautiful, artistic, and functional at the same time. These are things that you can illustrate in your work. Now, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, if I were you, draw your architecture to show just this. This is something that you may want to think of as an enhancement to a section or as a detail in an elevation that you might be preparing. But thinking of the ways that buildings can link together with things like fabrics, banners, and runs of light fixtures. Again, thinking of the ground plane as not just a simple 5-foot ADA, right, 4-inch slab of concrete that gets us from here to there. And certainly, please, not thinking of it as cool because it's radiused, right? Let's not do that. Let's think of it as a complete ground plane that is kind of the marriage between softscape and hardscape. And hardscape not just as all one material, but actually as maybe a couple of materials. Like here, you're seeing brick pavers in the lower left, and then you're seeing like a reticulated modular stone element that is in the upper left. And yet they all kind of knit together, again, like fingers interlocking. The High Line does this with some depth and beauty as well when you look at some of those voided out conditions as places where grasses rise up and create a vertical texture, which is in contradistinction to the horizontal sort of line work that the hardscape creates. Oh, I also like this. I have no idea what that trellis lattice thing is beyond. But I love this idea that maybe an architect was commissioned just for something that was floating ahead to create kind of a pergola, a modern sculptural sort of pergola in the environment that maybe has no sort of building function as per se, but is maybe the kind of thing where in a city or in a community where, you know, you want to create some identity you say, you meet me under the upside down boat, or you meet me under the big metal pergola, right? Again, the alley as an opportunity for celebrating the spaces between buildings to make it a real place, and doing that by simple signage and by simple lighting. And then to the left of or underneath it, where it says Graffiato, right? The doors into that little cafe aren't simple 3x6 or 3x6/8 Conair doors. There may be giant barn doors, right? Or overhead sectional doors, or maybe they just ride up right into the ceiling. Who knows? Maybe they're like NanaWall, where they accordion as they open. But thinking of the entry into an establishment that might be commercial or retail in your development as something more than just what you know how to do, or just what you know would work. Thinking of it as an opportunity. Showing your architecture in a moment of an event by populating it with people, doing things that people do when they're in crowds. Again, showing the architecture like we saw before, and like we saw just a moment ago, at a special time of day, so that people can imagine what that space is like in the winter, or in the summer, in the evening, or in the morning. Again, thinking of the ground plane, for those of you who have a lot of ground plane that you're sort of working with, right? Tim has got that, Brianna has that, Drew has that, Adam has that. Thinking of the ground plane is not just the space between the building and the sidewalk as, you know, sod that has to be mowed and edged and weeded and watered, but thinking of it as a landscape that people can walk on, rollerblade on, skateboard on, run on, do yoga on, and not just a flat surface, right? A surface that has topography on it that allows you to maybe rest on that sloping pyramid and get some sun at the end of lunch, or just that it's a space that people can play, where children can play and run up and down that ridge and up and down and hide from one another. And thinking of the green space as something more than simple sod, but thinking of it as a condition where maybe the vegetation is something you can harvest, right, and eat the fruits of that harvest, or maybe thinking of it as something that as we move through the seasons, right, the landscape changes color because of the way things bloom or the way things flower, and so on. And so again, that ties back to the rendering and thinking about the temporal moment that your renderings can be in. So you probably know what I'm going to say here. Thinking of your residences not only as the space that you've enclosed with the walls and punctuated with windows, but thinking of the spaces as something that leaks or extends into a space next door. Imagine how this might actually be, you know, Heather's apartment, but then like Drew lives over here, and knowing that we can share this courtyard, and that both courtyards can be, or that courtyard can be not only shared but open up, and then the whole sort of axis that connects one dwelling unit to another, right, is emphasized by virtue of the walls and the windows, and how windows actually become doors that open to a much larger opening than, again, a 3-foot by 8-foot kind of door. So if you're doing like shared housing, or where parents or grandparents need to keep their eyes on kids, these are the kinds of devices, right, that you can deploy as designers of these things. All of these things that I'm talking about are things that you should be thinking about in your work now. Again, thinking about the gap between things. In this case, the stairways are kind of sculptural elements on the outside, and thinking about the courtyard as something that's more than just the ground between two buildings, but thinking of it as a place that's lighted, a place that has landscape, hardscape, and so on. Right, where in this case, this looks like an old, an airport facility. But again, thinking about landscape as a geometric concern, and the pathways are kind of the linkages, right, between those geometries, not just simple 5-foot sidewalks. And notice how this sidewalk dog legs, right? It runs and then turns and goes back to the sidewalk along the building. But as it extends from the building at this angle toward us, it then becomes a deck upon which we can sit, wrapped with a metal wall that retains the grasses beyond. So thinking again about materials as a way of unifying and making cohesive the landscape vocabulary with the architecture vocabulary. Lighting at night, another way of adding, this is that same courtyard that I just showed you, lighting at night that gives some sense of definition and whimsy to the space. Thinking of the hardscape not only for its durability in terms of rolling trash dumpsters and carts along it, pop-up food trucks and that sort of thing, but thinking of the hardscape as a porous or semi-pervious surface that promotes like sensible stormwater management. Thinking of architecture, right, as the canvas on which landscape can grow and be encouraged to soften the hard edges or to articulate and emphasize the shape of architecture, in this case, this repeating archway, which is emphasized by this repeating use of vegetation. Again, seating areas as deliberate places to pause. And then there's nothing maybe better than just kind of an informal or random configuration of tables and chairs that could be movable, right, to sustain an intimate conversation or be changed so that a parent can watch a child play as they move from one sort of play area to another. Again, thinking about connectivity, thinking about places inside and places outside, where the architecture and the ceiling, for instance, of the restaurant extends out past the wall of glass, and how that wall of glass opens up completely into a seamless kind of condition between the interior realm and the exterior realm. This is all stuff we've seen in the work of David Baker and Loha. I love how, the materials here are real simple. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just concrete masonry units. This is just simple, dumb 8 by 16 blocks, right? 8 by 8 by 16. They're painted black to create the conditions at the bridge, right? With yellow at the first floor to give some sense of maybe identity where the entrance might be. And then the turquoise color of the block is the contrast to it, to the black, to give a code to or suggest the form or function of the residential units. And the gap between the buildings is a very simple pathway, but it's also a line of landscaping as well. When you have changes of levels, right, it's an opportunity to create a here and there condition where one outdoor room with a trellis above it can link to a lower room which is open perhaps to the sky above. And then how that room can be framed by vegetation up close and at a low scale, and then a wall beyond at a higher and more vertical scale. And introducing a variety of materials like metal, like wood, and like clay tile. This is an interior sort of space, but it has exterior language. So this is kind of interesting. If you're like in the case of Adam, who's looking at the old school building, right? This could be kind of that residual space between the dwelling units, where it's both hardscape and outdoor realms, but clearly it's part of an interior kind of language, a very interesting use of materials. again, the idea of a special place just for reading, for thinking, for holding hands, surrounded by a landscape of soft grasses that blow and move in the wind and change colors through the season. And then the most simple details of metal and wood pergola to give some definition to place. Stairways not only serve as a way of getting up and down, but they can actually be whimsical and capricious. They can be something that engages people for more things than just connectivity. Retaining walls, right, that can be both functioning to allow moisture to come through it, to retain earth and the forces that it is pushing back against, but it's a branding effort, and it's also an artistic sort of a blank slate upon which these architects and designers try to suggest what could happen as you enter this development. Thinking about how simple materials, right, can do a couple of things. One, a simple material like a paver like this shows us the kind of, you know, humanity, right? The trades, the craftsmen, the knowledge that comes from installing brick pavers, granite pavers like this. This takes a certain skill, and not everyone has it, but this kind of surface is one that harkens back to classical Rome. It harkens back to the streets of antiquity, and it's still something that we see even in our cities today. But at the same time, notice a couple of other things. Notice how the gap between the stones is an opportunity just to put slag sand or dirt in, and in some cases it encourages, because of moisture and because of the lighting, the natural sunlight, it allows moss to grow in it. So creating kind of a soft green patina in and amongst all of that stone. And then also look at how the sizes of the stone vary and how not each stone is the same size. So thinking about craftsmanship, surface, repetition, and variety, and the organic, all with just a paver. Thinking about how you come to your building. You know, a lot of you have been sort of talking to me about these traditional buildings. This is a very traditional building, but you know, it's using a different kind of language, like, right, like two-story window openings for the common lobby with a frameless kind of glass, and then a sort of traditional French door that's not in glass at all. It's in wood and glass. And then look at the dormers, real simple doghouse dormers, but the dormer comes up as an extrusion of the stone wall. I really love that. But I think the other thing that's important about this is the approach, right? The pavers of the walkway are wide and proud. They're flanked by landscaping. They're flanked by a stone wall, and then that stone migrates to become the porch for that residential unit. Thinking of, oops, let me go back one because I love this slide. Thinking again about how the building can connect out to the landscape with soffits or fabrics that provide shade and definition, and then the landscape begins to respond to that, not only with things that can grow, but with hardscape as well. And then again, that same attitude, maybe it's blue stone pavers to the right that lead up to steps to the upper right, and then maybe it's a metal walkway along the building that lets you get from the higher level down to the lower level. And then that blue stone migrates through at some diagonals that are only wide enough for a child to walk on, which gives it kind of an edgy, playful kind of moment. And then there's these large wood decks with narrow slats to give it a different physical texture, a different oral texture, and it's all framed by these plants. I really love this. And then off to the very right, you see how the use of stone as a transition between the blue stone and the architecture comes into play. Good stuff. Thinking of how materials can change, where you have this arcing pathway in one material, but that pathway has a very normal geometry to it, and then a pathway leading to the double doors that are white that has a different geometry to it at all. These are things that you're drawing as you're delineating your site plan. These are things that when you're drawing them, you should be referencing in your mind materials. You should be delineating those materials with color. Again, thinking about inside and outside, thinking about it as these are kind of the same function. So thinking clearly that outdoor spaces have program content potential. Paley Park in New York City, it's, you know, a 40 by 120 space raised up off the street, and it's this most enchanting oasis from the hustle and bustle of New York City, with a wall of water beyond, framed by really fine Baltic ivy to the left and rhododendrons to the left, Baltic ivy to the right and rhododendrons to the left. Pavers, sidewalks blending together to create a much larger expanse of hardscape. Again, thinking about inside and outside and rendering them. This is a Lumion rendering. So this is showing the way we do it, photoreal people with a softer sensibility about the architecture to give the drawing kind of a painterly quality. Thinking about the things you knew and learned in first year, geometry, triangles, squares, rectangles, and circles, and thinking about them as places, thinking about them as the language of your landscape area, so that your landscape is as thoughtful and as designed as your floor plans, for instance, are. Thinking about it, thinking about the sort of facade, right, as a landscape opportunity here as well. Thinking about architecture as this sort of whimsical and capricious and maybe irreverent thing that's very modern at one moment, but soft and green at another. Thinking about like simple objects like clay tile crocks as opportunities for not only wine bottles in your dorm room, but right as a plantscape opportunity for a wall in a corridor. Water, you know, the presence of water is certainly an important thing. This happens to be Carlo Scarpa in Venice. This is that same idea, again, of introducing diagonals against a normal or preponderant sort of grid or walkway. Again, trying to introduce a mixture of geometries that might be operating on your site. Again, a wall as green, or the floor as green. Illuminated benches, celebrated alleys, and simple things, right? Like a 9 square or a 16 square, 15 square pergola that multiplies out and creates a place to play and have fun. Alleys, edges, water, recesses and voids. This is a bookstore, an open air bookstore. Pocket park within the landscape. Thinking of the facade actually as a way of reminding us of the context, right? The use of wood, the use of these sort of elements remind us of the texture of the landscape. Here, by the way they're used for the balconies, and it gives a nice warmth and contrast to the architecture of the white concrete. Thinking of balconies that, you know, link ourselves to the ground plane, and then this like I would love this backyard. I'd hardly ever have to mow, right? Because it's this sort of pattern of hardscape, and I love this idea too of how the hardscape is probably one half of the greenscape, but they both have a kind of an equal sort of role in telling the story about how you move from one area to the other. Fencing. Fencing doesn't have to be this completely opaque thing. It can have its own pattern. Right? Fences can also become benches. Fences can become ceilings that mark pathways. And certainly the way you draw, right? The way you sort of illustrate that stuff. Some of these are repeats. And in some cases, you know, Dublin, Ohio, right, where the architecture is very traditional, thinking about the alley not only as the front door for all of the residences, but it's also a place where the United Postal Service, the milk truck, the garbage truck can also use this space. And I appreciate the way that, you know, it's not any worse for the thinking about door places again as an event. Thinking a lot about how your architecture meets the street. You know, this is kind of an interesting suggestion, these couple of slides. You know, this could be a final rendering for your class, right, for your studio, showing both the street, the ground plane, the first floor retail, and just a glimpse of the architecture without having to go into tremendous detail about the overall building, providing, if you will, a snippet, a glimpse of everything. And here as well, and here as well. And what I want to do is you start getting into rendering and drawing things. I want to spend some time looking at the views that you're setting up so that they are views that complement your architecture and show it in the best light. Terrific shot. So that's what I wanted to show you tonight. I do have a couple more plans, and I'll do these real quick. These are mostly about residential, showing in section how to look at ways of providing some information about space, connectivity, sunlight, views, things like that, giving hierarchy to the floor plan with simple graphics. I love the red section line, for example. Thinking of views inside of the dwelling units that, you know, make something special out of the simple and prosaic thing like a stairway. Lighting as a way of making the space maybe a little bit more interesting, thinking of the wall of glass as not just a wall with windows in it, but where the whole thing opens up again. Thinking of the floor plan as a beautiful drawing. Thinking of diagrams as a way of telling us the story about how you came upon your work. Then we get into Brush Park. For some reason why we had that, I don't know. A little view of the kitchen can go a long way. I love how the countertop becomes, you know, like a waterfall, becomes the end panel of the counter. It's both for eating and storage. I love the sensibility about that. Thinking about architecture as a thing that's, you know, telling the story as it moves down the street with different materials, but not a lot of different materials. Diagrams. Thinking of the kitchen really like as a two-story space, which is a really, I think, provocative idea. Thinking of the stairway not only as a sculptural element, right? And a functional element, but as something that is also double functioning. You know, it doesn't just get you up and down the stairs. It's also a place that you can sit on at a party or store things in after the party. These are renderings actually here. Stairway is a sculptural element. Worker spaces. A really small apartment, 2-story in height, with an overhead sectional door that leads out to a balcony. That's pretty cool. An elevator with a stair wrapping around it. Stairway that's kind of this provocative, continuous wood thing, like a wet fettuccine noodle, and it becomes this sort of major sculptural element. Thinking of simple materials like wood, metal panel, and glass as the only language that you use. The color of black. My own house is all black with white windows, and so it sets up kind of a compositional counterpoint to the entire neighborhood, much like this terrace does. Here's the actual houses that I just showed you a moment ago. How the kitchen is kind of a lens, right? There's an archway or a frame that defines the kitchen from the rest of the space. So there's a soffit with lighting on it, but it's also kind of its own room. It's kind of a cool image. Stair as a, or wood as a screen for a stairway. Glass as a screen for a stairway. Metal as a handrail. Metal as the surface. Again, where the wood treads become places to lounge and sit and do homework, or where the stairway is a sculptural trapeze. Overhead doors again. Again, the courtyard is a major programmatic element to the architecture. And that's it. So I'll let you sort of think about all that as we move into this next push. I'll have one more chat with you on Monday next week. I'll show you some drawings from some of your colleagues. So it'll be kind of like a reunion, class reunion for me. I'll get to look at all of the drawings, and my hope is that when I do that talk next winter, God willing, I'll have some of your drawings in there as well. So I think that's what I wanted to go over. I think that since Brandy usually takes Monday night, I'd ask that whoever is scheduled for Monday night, that we meet starting now. You may have like gotten like the 8:30 or whatever time slot, but I'd like to take care of as many as are signed up for tonight, starting basically now. So who do I get to visit with first? Okay, and then next? Wait, you're saying yes and no? Not you? Or
say, who am I visiting with tonight?
yes, you.
But I'm not first.
You're not first, and then who else? Okay, so Mark, are you first? You're going to be first because Brandy was first.
Oh, I'm second. I can go first.
Okay, so you're going to go first, and then Mark. And if anyone else wants to go tonight, this would be a good time to do that. You'll just go third, which would make it a normal night. Otherwise, I'll see the rest of you on Wednesday night, okay? Cool. Okay, Brianna, you have the floor.
Okay. I'll start by showing, so it's kind of funny that you showed us all those pictures because I've been looking at pretty much the same ideas.
Sure.
I'll show you some of the stuff that I was looking at. So been thinking about the idea of changing the grade and
Mm.
changing the height of different outdoor areas.
Mhm.
So looking at a few examples of things.
Mhm. Exactly.
So kind of like these little colorful areas that, you know, dip down can be more prone to like children and things of that nature. I've also seen a lot of really cool like playgrounds for kids, but
Absolutely. And a lot of the stuff I showed tonight was should be right in your wheelhouse, right? In terms of your site, in terms of your sort of subject matter.
yeah. And then I feel like I want to design the whole playground, but I don't have time for that.
Right.
I liked this, how it was kind of like this is the garden courtyard and this is the small courtyard. So just breaking up the outdoor space into different like areas,
Exactly.
like floor plan. I liked this because it had like these dips and then these protrusions from the ground. I'm kind
Right.
of thinking along the lines that like this children's space is kind of going to be sunk into the ground,
Hmm.
because you can see better if you're above it. And then maybe the vegetation and the gardens are going to be in these raised beds to show those.
Wow, that's a cool facade.
It's the Armstrong Senior Center by David Baker.
Wow, I don't know this one. You know, I follow them on Instagram and Twitter. I'll leave it there for a second. And I have never seen this piece. I'm kind of knocked out. First of all, I mean, obviously there's color, right?
Mhm.
But it's not a huge range of color. And it's obviously just really simple in terms of the skin. And he's created this kind of mosaic, almost like Native American patterns that you might find in artwork, or like on a belt of a Native American Indian. You know, it kind of has that sort of quality to it. And then he contrasts it with real simple like aluminum siding or hardy plank on the left there, and yet pulls in some of those colors to create spandrel. So
Even
this
some
is
colors in the
really
flowers.
interesting. Say that again, please.
Even some of the colors in the landscape mimic
Well,
that.
sure. Yeah, I'm seeing that too. So yeah, so this creates a whole visual sort of cohesive vibe. That's cool. This is, go back one image.
Yeah, I like how the circle platform is like, it's kind of its own space, even though it's just a translation between the stair and the
Yeah.
ground plane.
How the light fixture is the same color of the red or orange red.
Yeah, I've
These
been
are-
very impressed by their.
Their work is really good. I'm really fond of it. I don't know anything about them other than what I see. So, I mean, you know what? If we go back to that, we're going to linger on this because you brought it up. So when I was talking to you in your write-up, Brianna, and
Yes.
talking to you about the elevations, this is sort of what I'm trying to. So I'm really excited that, I mean, I know you're showing me this for the purpose of the landscape, and that's good, and that aligns with what we're talking about tonight. But I think this is kind of as evidencing, right, what I was talking about for you and the elevations.
Something more. I mean, it's kind of really lighthearted.
Yeah, and I think it's entirely appropriate for, you know, this subject matter that you're housing, the age group that they exhibit. You know, it's a real serious place, but it's not a real serious architecture. It's playful, it's fun, it's memorable. And yet I think if you like did a figure ground of the windows, they're all kind of I mean, there's some variety, but the windows are not the foreground element. It's the color and the pattern of the color.
Which might
It's
be
a-
nice because it's, I mean,
Right.
it kind of plays on not super expensive windows, but
Well, yeah,
more on the facade.
very cool. Good find.
Okay, now we're gonna move on. Just a few more images, I think.
I love this too. It's the same colors, right?
Yeah.
But it's a different way to approach them. One thing is to do things to do different things with different colors, which this picture is showing, and then doing normal windows against windows that have some variety or mixture to them, as evidence in the white. But notice how the white is not just white. Notice how it's kind of a cream over kind of orange sherbet. You know what I'm saying? Like sorbet.
It's
Or
just a really
sherbet.
subtle change.
Totally subtle.
And then, you know, you have the raised planting beds.
Yep.
Same thing with this is the same thing, only.
It is the same piece.
Yep. And I like that they create these paths.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see like kids running through these paths and everything like that too. You know, riding their bikes or whatever. I like this because it had this vegetation kind of surrounding this internal play area. But I wasn't sure about, you know, because it's kind of about the view toward the play area. So I'm not sure if this would work just like this is, but maybe kind of lower it and create a nice like soft border around the area.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice rendering.
And then this kind of, it hugs the sidewalk, so it seems a little narrower, but it's a pretty open space. So thinking
Yep.
of that for like the entrance.
Yep. This is kind of like the gap between your buildings.
Yep, just right off Mason
The
Street.
here there thing, and there's one of those simple metal pergolas right there, right? That
Which I was thinking could be like a little, you know, garden shed or something along the lines of that. Just a nice site plan with a bunch of different kind of moves. I like the bridge from the two that connects the two buildings on the second level or the third, whatever level.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And then this is a little bit more playful of kind of rising out of the ground, but also, you know, sitting around the edge of it.
I wonder if that pathway is stepped down too. I can't really tell if it, maybe it's not, but
it seems pretty flat.
Yeah, I think it's right. I think you're right. Okay, that's a cool image. That's a cool image too.
Yeah, so I've been looking at the paving and things like that. This was really kind of, it caught my eye because it has this, you know, this little play area, but it has the gardens off to the right. So I kind of picture this as the interior of my space. And this is an alley leading into it. So it kind of has all these little elements that I'm trying to incorporate as well. And then this is all stepped up areas. And back to the beginning.
Good.
And then I'll go right into this. So I was looking at, you know, making this second layer to the courtyard space. And I'm kind of on the fence about it because of like the cost of something like this. And I know that shouldn't like hinder my design, but I'm not entirely sold on that yet. Looking at like these raised garden beds and this raised, you know, area for the children. And then looking at like covering this and shielding it from the sun and just something simple like that. And then this was more locating it around the perimeter, so you have your open space still pretty open. Looking that. And then I cut back these corners kind of like I was thinking when I first started with this geometry.
I remember the little modules that you did that on.
Yeah, because I do think that I want more of an exposed outdoor space, but maybe they're smaller areas.
Did you drop bridges in this effort? Oh, you did.
Yeah. So this kind of connects them all, and these are like the landing pads. So this is like the social space, and this is, the transition space. And then looking at, something like this where they all come together in this meeting space, and kind of pushing these walls out. And then just connecting these two spaces so they can get down, and looking at like this being the entrance and dividing it and separating like the sunken play area, and looking at the paths between the buildings and how they can kind of push and pull away from each edge, and so your sightline isn't directly through the whole thing. And then I have, for this one, I made these a lot smaller.
I see that too.
So they still have, the more private outdoor second area. And then kind of a larger bridge across the center. And then looking at totally sinking this kind of whole area away from the buildings, maybe putting the buildings up higher than all of the surrounding landscape. Getting rid of it that way, and that's it. And I wanted to stop sharing this first. I was wondering about, because you did write that I'll need an elevator and like the elevation changes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking in my head that I didn't need that because everything on the ground floor was the public space, and the only thing on the second floor was the bedrooms, but there are also bedrooms on the first floor. So I was thinking in my head that just because the first floor was accessible that I was all right.
As long as everything that's on the second floor is available to everyone on the first floor, and you're not more than 3 floors.
Right, I'm just 2.
You can do that.
So you're saying availability, like the use?
That dwelling
first
units that happen on the second floor have the same opportunity for those that are handicapped as there are on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's true. You do not need the elevator. The elevator may be desirable, however, right, for people moving in and moving out, or people that are handicapped, or not handicapped, but just like find it difficult to get around and choose to live on a second floor. Maybe they become older and less able to get around as they've lived there for a while. So just thinking about that as a consideration, I think, is maybe where I would pull back a little bit on my observation and have you think about it in those terms.
Okay.
So I kind of like the bigger balconies because I think it has it plays a much more active role in the architecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really pushes it away.
And I don't like the bridge where there's the room in the middle, because it makes the room in the middle too conspicuous, and it takes away from the new outdoor rooms that I've just said should be the bigger ones and not the smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of like the bridges running all over the place, but I think they're better when they're just connecting 2 buildings and not all 4.
Yeah, they're not as large and
They're not as foreground, right? So could we go back to that for a second?
Mhm. So
I would have to draw like a circle around the one that if I were working with you, I would make you draw a circle around it. So if I open up the file, I would know which one to look at.
are you talking like this?
Yeah, I like I like that one better.
Like this without these bridges?
Yeah, I think the patios there. I mean, I don't know what it does, Brianna, to your units and the yield or the functionality of those units, but I think it's more. It creates a better quality of openness to the interior courtyard when the stairways are situated relative to just one bridge.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think if we go back to that one that I'm talking about, I think that bridge can be a little bit more than that. I think it can be really, really special. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I would try to treat it as a sculptural element.
Okay.
I don't know about the two purple things, but I do appreciate the sunken and, the sunken quality of it. I think that could be very interesting. I think you should. I do think you should try to resist doing like simple geometries and dropped into the spaces between the buildings. I think you should try to think of the landscape as part of a much larger fabric that's connecting the hospital to the neighborhood.
Okay. I kind of understand that, but not.
Yeah, well, like in the stuff that I showed you earlier today, thinking about lines and traces and
Oh,
things that move through the site, not just things that drop onto the site like a helicopter pad. That's
Right,
kind of the read that one gets of something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what else did we talk about in your review? Well, I know what I talked about, but what do you want to talk about from your review, from the summary, the essay that I wrote?
Things that I wrote down.
Should I open it up?
You put to apply the sectional quality to basically everything.
Yeah, so
the
like
landscape.
maybe that would be one way to think about, your landscape as well as somehow to the architecture. So like you can see me. So if you're looking at the screen, this is like your sectional quality, right? And then it goes up and then over. So what if you took that bent line and rotated it vertically? That's like the David Baker thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm intrigued with that David Baker example, because it relates back to the trace of your section, and then it begins to inform the architecture. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Let's see. Go ahead.
I already talked about the ADA.
Yeah.
And that was one of the other main points, is just, focus on the landscape, because it was nothing, and the spaces between the buildings, so the little alleys. I don't think I'll be locating both entrances to the buildings in, like, the front entrances in those
Okay.
alleys, because of the other proximity to Mason Street where the parking will be.
Okay.
But the main entrance for the back two buildings will be through those alleys. And then, back doors from the other ones as well.
Okay. I also said, when I talked about the ADA and accessibility, again, I think you are free from major concern for that, because what you're doing on the second floor happens equivalently on the first floor. So that's the threshold. But I am suggesting that the ceiling does not need to be one consistent plane. That the
Right.
ceiling, and we talked about this before as well, that the ceiling can have that sort of agitation. It can have that sort of zigzag line quality to it sectionally that allows for clerestory windows and skylights and just 1.5 story spaces, 2-story spaces. So those are opportunities for you. And I think if you look at the ceiling sectionally, particularly the second floor, that gives some relief to the flat roof condition that's kind of pervasive in your project, which makes it look kind of flat. I guess that's where I'm taking my criticism. So thinking about maybe letting some of the elements pop up so that the roof can be used. Thinking about the architecture as something that has pressure on the roof plan so that there's volumes that come up to create clerestory lighting opportunities in strategic places within the inside. That's what that second paragraph is talking about, and the third paragraph.
Are you thinking like being able to inhabit the roof as well?
Possibly. Possibly.
I'm not entirely sold on the idea yet, but I'll play with it.
All right. Who runs this place? Who's going to live there besides the families? Are there going to be faculty or leaders or executive directors?
Maybe people that work there, that do things in the community center and do things with the classrooms, but not like workers who live there and take care of the people, because I don't think that's a necessity.
Okay.
It's not like an assisted living home. It's just
Right. So there's not really a need for an executive director to live and work there, and
no,
they would need a special unit,
I don't
a
think so.
larger unit or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, mainly just people coming in to teach classes, or maybe partnering with a nonprofit in the area that, these people come in to this area and donate their time or something along the lines of that.
Mhm. Okay. And I'll just say this, in case you didn't really sense it, you improved on this project from your first review, and I feel like that's notable, and I'm glad for you on that. And so I hope that you can keep the pressure on yourself to continue that improvement into this last push. All right.
I think I
So
can do that.
so you're trending, right? If you will. And I want to see that. I want to see for you that trend improving. All right.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thanks.
I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. Where's the cursor? Okay. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
Yes.
You want to go over your review statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I got a whole bunch of different ideas or suggestions.
I wrote a lot for you.
Yeah, you did. But not just with you, with the others as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, you
general,
did get a lot of good ones, I thought.
Yeah, some people kind of like saw it going one way, some people kind of saw it going the other way. So I guess one thing is what I focused on, or what I started to think about more is really nailing down that like what I'm showing and why I'm showing it,
Right.
and how I'm showing it, so
Right.
that people understand it, I guess.
Yeah, that's communication. That has to do with
Yeah.
the verbal, that has to do with the graphical, and I think it has to do with, and this is the most important thing, the sort of thinking, right? Have more clarity in that, be more precise and, if you will, streamlined in that, so that the architecture is quickly graspable and it's much easier to connect it back to the research.
Right. Other than that, kind of been working on, I guess showing like what is it about this area that can actually be developed into something nice, and like why here, I guess,
Right.
is the other question.
Which is, something that we talked about, and it could be something as simple as making it really clear what Constance's plan is,
Yeah.
and what you've snapped off
Yeah.
as the architect for your developer, because that's all she or he wants to afford to buy right now from the city, and the city's ready to sell your client that piece.
Right.
And my points, I think, at the end, in terms of, I think I said is at the end. Hold on. I also feel like in the absence of Constance's urban plan being fully built out at the commencement or the beginning of your development's build out, you need to take some kind of place narrative, or you need some kind of place, like why here, why now? What would motivate me to move here? What can I actually do on the roof above the parking? Is there a pool? Is there a patio area, a garden? All of these things, maybe even more things. I don't know. You need, so it can't just be like pure housing.
Yeah.
And it won't, the retail space won't be an Apple store,
No.
but it also won't be a Plum Market or a Whole Foods. But you need to, like, say what it is.
Definitely.
Right?
And yeah, that's, I don't know. It's not like I haven't been thinking about that and wanting to put that in. It's just, like you said, in the thing, it is time management, and I've been probably spending too much time on like one area and not really so much on another.
You have all the tools to do this.
Yeah, I'm planning to take a week off of work, and it's going to be my Hell Week before Hell Week. To just like
Will work mind?
What was that?
Will work mind that you're doing this?
Yeah, I don't think they don't really mind. They're pretty flexible.
Where do you work again? Remind me, please.
SSOE.
Yeah. All right, and you're at Troy?
Yeah.
You work with Ryan?
I don't think he works there.
Ryan Cousino?
Oh, Kazuno. You know what? You mentioned that name. I meant to look him up, but
He's
the
been
name
there about
sounds
15
familiar,
years.
so I've seen him around.
And I think Vanessa just started there,
Vanessa
correct?
did just start there. I'm surprised you. I don't know if you're following her on like Facebook or something.
Well, she's connected to me, and I think I saw on LinkedIn that she started there this week or last week. So
yeah, I think today was her first day because she went around and met everybody.
I'm excited for her. That's good. I don't think I know anybody else there, though. I think it's just you and Ryan. Where are your offices in Troy again?
Just above Big Beaver Road. Like right west or east of the Somerset.
So are you Crooks in Big Beaver?
Yeah.
You're above the Cruise and Mures, that area over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool. How long have you been there?
About a year and a half.
Uh-huh. So I had a student that worked for you guys, but in Toledo, and she lived in Wyandotte, and she drove an hour every day to be there.
Yeah. There's people who live, I'm kind of wondering if they live next to Tim, because they live in Grand Blanc.
Oh, wow, really?
So
that's right. I've heard that a lot of the older guys from your company live up in Flint, in Grand Blanc, in Lake Orion.
Mm-hmm. They used to have a Flint office, I believe.
That's why.
Yeah,
that's why.
So
that's a hell of a drive.
Yeah, a lot of them they have like a bus system.
Yeah, they carpool in or whatever.
So it's kind of,
yeah, you could at least like,
I wouldn't mind taking a bus to work every day and
Well, you have a different ride because yours is east-west,
Yeah.
and that's not a fast route.
No.
That's
It's,
stopping at every half mile and zigging, then zagging.
Yeah.
And where do you live again?
Basically Telegraph and like 10 Mile. It's like right at the corner of the highway.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you have that's an awful drive.
Yeah, there's not really a direct
Sorry.
route. No.
Yeah, it's just that's not a drive I would like to make. My drive is crazy too, but at least it's sort of culturally entertaining as I make my way through Highland Park and Detroit in some areas. So I do think you have all the tools. I know you do. One of the tools that you have is actually, which is a strength, is actually the tool that's hurting you. You're like me, an overthinker, and I think my position is that you should just make a deliberation and a determination on what's going to happen on the ground floor and what kind of retail space it's going to be, what's going to happen on the community space, delineate and design the connection up to it from the street, where that is, what that looks like, how it feels, and then literally call that a day. I think you had a community space you had talked about. You need to design that as an element or an object, and then get into the meat of your narrative, whether it's this, in terms of your research, right? The shared spaces or the rental spaces or the family dynamic stuff. I think you need to pin that down and let that guide what you're doing.
Right. One comment that some people had about that central area, because I brought up like the hutongs and those types of things, they kind of like wanted to see more alleyway or something going on there, and I don't know if it would be like in the back, if I could maybe, this is where it starts to get more complicated. If I push and pull some of those units so that some are like larger, some are smaller, they're not just this one flat plane.
I agree, that could work. I also talked about them as a skyline.
Yeah, that
right?
too.
For providing some variety in that. Just because you went there and you were inspired by that doesn't mean that everything they have need to find their way into what you're doing.
Right.
The thing about the hutongs, which you could interpret in your work, is maybe simply the feeling that you get between the interior buildings and each other. The interior buildings from the perimeter buildings, and maybe it's the stairway up and the stairway down. Maybe that's the essence of what you learned from the hutongs.
In a sense, I kind of thought about it more as like this community, because ultimately what they are is just a collection of houses, buildings put together that form this courtyard area, and they all kind of share that. And
as I remember, you were saying the hutong is really the street.
Yeah, the hutong is the street. Yeah,
right. So that's the gist of it. What else did your colleagues say?
Kind of same old with the write a speech, write it down. And
I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
No, I have to. I mean, I agree with it. I really don't like the mid-semester. Like I know what I want to produce, and I just want to produce it. And I feel like these like mid breaks just make me peel away from doing the project and make me like then start to do some graphical stuff, which is fine. But like I'm not done with the project, and I'm still developing it. And then in the end, it's going to change. So those graphics, I'm going to have to redo all of them anyway.
Mhm.
That's,
everyone's
yeah,
in that
it's
boat,
good
right?
practice. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone's in the same spot.
Right.
I
I think
suppose.
I think one project that you know, Brandy has an interesting project. You know, in many ways, she didn't make much of a commitment to the exteriors, but she talked a lot about missing middle housing. She talked about her site. She talked about the challenges of the site in terms of density, open space, and circulation.
Yeah.
She talked about unit designs, and she still has a long way to go. But like, I don't feel like she has to go back and do things over. So I feel like, you ultimately need to work the way you're comfortable working. I do understand that maybe the way this studio operates isn't like or conducive to the way that you like to work. But I would say that, the process does, as you work at SSOE longer, it does mirror, right, the linear way that we work as architects.
Yeah, you need to
on a
put the
design.
packages out. And,
Yeah, you need to pull packages through the office, and it's hard to do that. And there is there is regrouping, there is reworking, and there is redoing things. But ultimately, I think it's in the pursuit of optimizing and making better what you did before. So I don't really see it as destructive to the process. I see it more as contributive. But I can definitely see where you'd be frustrated by it, or wound up about it.
mm. I mean, I guess, I don't know. Moving on. They did talk about the concept. One of them, maybe two, talked about the concept of like the live, work, rent option. And that one, I didn't really explain it well, but it was interesting to kind of think about whether these people will actually be able to use it, or if they're just renting it out, who rents it out. It's kind of like a process that has to be explained as well.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what I'm saying too.
Mhm.
That you have to make that clear, and then have the drawings that make that explanation.
Yeah.
Let's see. The dogs are happy about something. Advanced working well at times. I actually did like what you showed. I was knocked out by the Ginkgo case study. I told you this when we met on Wednesday last week, and I appreciated the way that you looked carefully at that and interpreted that and made it your own work. It's a very peculiar project, and in many ways, it's not really a project I'm comfortable with from like an urbanistic perspective.
Right.
But I like what you did with it, and I think what you did with it improved it, and I think it was appropriate for this particular site in Southfield. I'm just reading my notes to you here. I guess, looking at the last remark, the last paragraph, this is actually a really timely project. As I started to talk about in the first paragraph, because Constance did this thing a year or two ago, we did this last summer, and that RFP is actually going out in a week or so. And I know that a lot of cities have this issue with land that they own that they got to offload so that they can generate, rent money from it, right? Tax base.
Yeah.
So, your plan is actually kind of a really important one. Maybe talk a little about its applicability to these other communities. Maybe talk a little bit about how what you're doing, this snapping off, this tearing off of one corner of her big plan, is maybe a model for approaching, you know, the launching of a big urban plan in these sort of bite-sized pieces. Because no developer, bless Constance's, you know, heart in how she may have thought of that big thing, but no developer has the capital to pull off what she illustrated.
Right.
It may be the right thing to do at the much larger scale, but you know, no one's going to own that. It's going to have to take a bunch of developers. So this is one way of you explaining your mentor's influence and how you're improving it, which I thought was a very courageous thing for you to say last Monday, and talk about it in terms of, you know, smart sizing the project into something that a local developer could get into. So I think this is an important project for its applicability to the marketplace and its applicability to Southfield. And ultimately it adds to, right, the conversation about how missing middle housing can actually operate. You have a unique understanding of Southfield. You have learned a lot about a demographic that exists there that not many people, probably even the people in Southfield, are aware of. I just feel like you need to help us understand exactly who that person or family is and what you predict they're going to want in their housing products. And your solutions are manifesting that. Your solutions are the result of your knowledge. They are the result of that research. That's sort of what I'm trying to say.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think so.
Cool. I'm just reading over everything again. I wrote yours on the plane. I think the guy next to me was like, oh my God. It was not anybody I knew, by the way, so don't worry. I guess the last thing I'd say to you about your presentation is I actually enjoy listening to you. You may not feel that way about what you've presented. You may not know that people do learn from you or that they do enjoy you as a person speaking about their ideas. But I actually do. I just want you to realize that that's the case, and that if you can like withdraw some comfort or confidence from that statement, then that's great. If not, then start believing more in yourself that you can do that, because I think you have some very interesting observations and you have some very interesting things to say. I'm just saying that in this class, you got to hit the 9-minute, and that's difficult for all of you guys. It's not just difficult for you.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the gig, right? That's what you got to do. And I'm willing to move the time limit up to 10 minutes, but you have to be willing to really work hard at saying what needs to be said, saying it in the order it needs to be said in, scripting it. You know, you heard me say this from the first day, scripting it so you stay on point, and letting the drawings say other things, right? You don't have to say everything. It's designing the presentation so that the drawings and the design is supporting the verbal narrative. I think you have all the tools to do that. You actually have a strong project. And honestly, I think your project, if you execute it the way you are thinking about it,
I can vision it. It's just,
yeah, I think you have the potential to kick it into that next tier of grades.
I don't know. Every time you show these things, I just want to like do all of that, but
there's a lot of people that don't look at those things and they're seeing them for the first time. And so my notion is to get them to start saying, oh, I never thought I could put a swing in a kitchen. That's a cool idea. I should do that. I've got a 2-story space. I thought that was the big idea. I was going to do a 2-story space. Nobody does a 2-story kitchen. But now with a swing in it, for example, right? And you can illustrate a swing in the kitchen in your rendering. Suddenly that's kind of like thinking about the space, thinking about design in a provocative way. You don't even have to say anything about the swing. The swing is self-evident, right?
Mhm.
And so for a lot of people, I don't think that they even look at this stuff when they're looking at the internet or when they're traveling. Or so my goal is to remind them that this stuff is there, and that it is the ingredients of they are the ingredients of architecture, and that I'm just here to provoke it. But at the same time, I need to say this: you can't possibly do all those wonderful things in each project. You have to sift through. You have to edit it.
Yeah.
And while I love that you're getting excited about all the things you're seeing in this semester and even seeing tonight, you got to be like,
It's
I'm
overwhelming.
going to save that for another project,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I know my big points are that exterior courtyard area.
Yep.
And what's happening around the
Prioritize.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over on anything in terms of drawings tonight?
I had worked on like a little like area plan, and I'm working on a site plan, but I wasn't able to get that much done.
Okay.
A lot less than I wanted to. But I've got there was a test that was moved up for another class to this weekend or tomorrow.
Gotcha.
And then there's a research day thing that I'm doing for the GRA position. And
So you're flat out right now.
yeah, we're submitting for a Lafarge Holcomb
Good.
award as well.
Good. Who's doing that submittal with you?
It's kind of part of the GRA job. So I've got like 3 deadlines kind of tomorrow.
Get back at it. Get
but,
those things done.
Yeah,
So
there's Drew Bradford. I don't know if you knew him. He was here like a few years. I think he graduated in 2014.
No, it's not a name I know.
No. Andrew Bradford, if that helps.
No.
He's at MSU now.
He was a student?
Yeah, he was a student here at LTU.
No, not familiar with him. So you're doing that with him?
Yeah, with him and Constance, and technically anybody from like Megan Markowicz a little bit.
Oh, the STEM group?
Yeah.
Cool.
So Studio CI stuff.
Sounds good. Well, blast through that so you can look at this then.
Yeah.
Right. I'm meeting Brandy at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Nate Ringholtz at 10:30. If you want to pop in, I'll be happy to invite you to that conversation. If you want to show me anything, just send me an email on Friday night. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thanks.